Neal. Councillor Neal is Vice Chair, and we have Councillor McLaren, Councillor Osanek, and Councillor Turner. And we have a variety of planning staff and the clerk's office with us. Mr. Thompson is our clerk. We have Director Paige Agnew and Manager Vendetti and Planner Sands, Planner Diedrichson, and Planner Argawal here, who are addressing many of the files. So I will begin with the normal public meeting introduction, as we have a number of public meetings this evening. Notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be opened to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Exemption to this rule is outlined in Bylaw number 2006-75 to delegate various planning approvals to staff and to adopt certain procedures for the processing of planning applications subject to delegated authority. Council has authorized staff to use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite this approval process. Public meetings reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to Planning, Building, and Licensing Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared, making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone with an interest in the matter may file an appeal. Interested persons are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And with that, I will now open our first public meeting, and it's an application for bylaw amendment 735, 743 King Street West. And Councillor McLaren will be declaring a conflict, but he will leave the room.
Just declare? Sure. I, Jeff McLaren of the Corporate City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of the planning application for D14044-2016, 735 King Street, in that I belong to several committees of the applicant corporation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, members of the committee and members of the public. My name is Mark Tao. I'm a professional planner with IBI Group. With me tonight is Nancy Cornish, also a professional planner, and also Mr. John Gerritsen. There are a number of others in the room as well, members of the church community involved with the project, and also two other professionals who also provided reports in support of the application. We'll be handing off the presentation at various points to different people, but I'll start off with a brief background of the project and the subject site. So this is for the property that would most well be known as the former site of the Church of the Good Thief. The church closed its doors in recent 2013 and has since been maintained by the church. The property has a number of buildings on it. They include the church building itself, which is in the bottom center of the site, as well as the former church rectory and the former church hall. The church hall fronts on Baden Street at the north end of the parcel, and the rectory fronts on McDonald Street on the west end of the parcel. The existing development you can see here, the church, which many of you would know if you're familiar with the area, is very visible from King Street West. The parish hall is a modest building at the rear of the property, is an older building that's had some addition to it over the years, and currently, or most recently, functioned as the parish hall. And then the rectory building, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a large original building with some additions to it. So all these three existing buildings are proposed to be maintained as part of the applications. I'll pass it off now to John Gerritsen, who played a role as part of the committee member, the committee who looked at redeveloping the church parcel, and he'll provide some background as to how the church got to where it is, and the reasoning and rationale behind what they're proposing.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. It's good to be back at City Hall again. As Mark has already mentioned, I'm a member of a volunteer committee that was set up by the Archdiocese of Kingston to look at what the future potential of the Church of the Good Thief is. As many of you know, the building was built in the 1890s, and it is very unique within the Catholic faith in the sense that there are only, I believe, 2 or 3 churches named after St. Dismas in the entire world. As a result of declining membership, the church was closed in 2013, and the committee was tasked with finding what potential uses of the church property could be made. I can tell you that the committee has been unanimous in its view for the last almost 2 years that it's met, that the integrity of the church should be maintained at all costs. And I would like to introduce at this point of time Archbishop Brendan O'Brien, who's in the audience here, Monsignor Joe Lynch, as well as the 2 archivists with the Sisters of Providence and the Religious Hospitallers of St. Joseph that are with us as well as other committee members. One of the reasons why it's necessary to have a modest redevelopment of the site take place is that back in 2012, before the committee was struck, a study was done by Pynchon Environmental Limited that indicated that in order to bring the building, the church building, back into a good state of repair, approximately $600,000 was needed in order for the necessary roof repair and the necessary repair to the walls. As many of you know, that particularly with limestone walls, it is not uncommon for water to seep between the 2 walls and to cause a tremendous amount of damage. I can recall a number of years ago, about $7 or $8 million were spent at St. Mary's Cathedral to accomplish exactly that kind of a repair model. As a result of an introductory meeting that we had with your city planning staff, that I had with the city planning staff, as well as another member of our committee, back in November of 2 years ago, so 15 months ago, it was decided to go ahead with this project. And so basically, a number of studies were done since that time. I've got a whole list of them here. If you could just give me a minute. These studies were done in order to satisfy your planning staff's needs in order to get a better grip on the entire situation. A conceptual site plan was done, a heritage impact statement was done, an archaeological study, a tree inventory and preservation plan, a planning justification report, a grading and servicing plan, a storm water management plan, a noise study, a landscaping study, a topography survey, and a parking study at a cost that so far is about $100,000 that has been spent so far. The idea is simply this. It's my understanding that because this property in effect already consists of 2 separate properties from a property development viewpoint, 2 additional lots can be created for each property. And the idea is that 3 separate lots be created, that the rectory sold off as a single-family residence, that the hall at the back that was rebuilt back in the early 1990s be sold as a residence as well, that the other 3 lots be developed for single-family residential purposes, and that the church building itself be retained by the Archdiocese of Kingston in order for it to become an archives of all matters that are of the Catholic tradition and faith in the Kingston area. We have had a great cooperation from the religious communities in Kingston, the school boards, even from some other Christian denominations as well, that could see this building, together with our archivists, being turned into a permanent study area, an archival building where all matters relating to the Christian development and Catholic development in the Kingston area can be maintained. So that has been the proposal. I might just add one other thing that came as a bit of a surprise to us, and that's the proposed interim control bylaw, which came out of the blue as far as we were concerned. The first that we heard about it was as a result of the meeting that council had, I guess, what would it be, about 10 days ago, that although I'm fully familiar with the interim control bylaws, having been the architect of it at the provincial level some 12, 13 years ago, I believe that what you're trying to accomplish there, which is a laudable goal, not to allow major expansions to take place to buildings so that more students can be housed, etc., has nothing to do with this particular property or with the development of this property. The directions that we've been given as a committee and that the committee has solidly adhered to and that we totally believe in, that the buildings that we are proposing and the existing buildings be single-family dwellings. I was raised in the area. My sister still lives in the area. This was my parents' parish church for over 60 years. I'm fully familiar with that part of Portsmouth. I realize that over the years, not much has changed in it as far as the development of properties in the area is concerned. And that's why throughout, rather than coming up with some sort of a massive residential component, we've always stated we want to make sure that whatever gets created there is in sympathy and in conformity with the rest of the neighborhood. And that's what we're doing. So I would strongly suggest, and I know I wasn't going to speak about this earlier, but I feel very strongly about this, is that if you are intending, and council has the right to do so, to put into place an interim control bylaw to deal with a situation that may very well be legitimate, that you exempt this particular application, because I can assure you that this will not be turned into a student housing complex. And finally, I might also note that an informal public meeting was held at the church on May the 12th. This meeting was widely publicized through the Portsmouth Villagers and through other methods as well. About 65 members of the general public, not just former church attendees, attended that particular meeting. I think the plans, as were described by our Brayan Associates, by IBI, by the other people, were widely accepted. I believe there was one dissenting voice, if I remember correctly, but I believe that at the public meeting, the informal public meeting, the concept that was proposed at that point in time, which is in total conformity what's being before you today, was accepted by the general public. And the reason, of course, for holding the informal public meeting was to avoid any kind of, those of us that have been involved in the public world know that quite often rumors can get started about particular development proposals that may turn to be totally incorrect. So rather than doing that, we thought it'd be best to come straight up front with the Portsmouth community, tell them exactly what was in mind, and it was well accepted. So I will just leave it at that. I hope that you will see your way fit to approve this application and also exempt it from whatever proposed action you may want to take with respect to the animal control bylaw. And with that, I'll hand the microphone back to Mark. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I'll just jump in and cover some of the more technical aspects of the proposal as required under the Planning Act. As John mentioned, we're requesting a zoning bylaw amendment to permit conversion of the Church of the Good Thief to an archives facility, conversion of the parish hall to a single detached dwelling, the separation of the rectory or clergy residence from the church parcel to be an individual lot and single detached dwelling, as well as to support the creation of 3 new vacant lots for future residential development. So as part of this, we're proposing to reconfigure the existing lot fabric to create 6 lots. On the next slide, I'll go over what those 6 lots will look like. All the existing buildings are to be maintained, and no new buildings or structures are proposed as part of this application. The lots are going to be created through part lot lift as they're full lots on a plan of subdivision, and this application has been filed. And the lots will be subject to site plan control. Again, this application has been filed as the properties are designated under the Ontario Heritage Act for architectural and historic significance. It's also subject to an Ontario trust easement, the church, as well as the immediate property around the church. This conceptual site plan illustrates the 6 lots. Lot number 1 will contain, if you can follow my cursor, the church. As mentioned, the church is to be maintained. We're requesting permission to convert the church to an archives facility. The details of how the archives facility will work within the church and where it will be located are still being worked out with archivists in the working group. There's parking proposed at the rear. 6 spaces. Access will be provided off of Baden Street. Lot number 2 will contain the rectory. It's to be maintained as is existing. The 3 lots to be created are lots 3, 4, and 6. Lots 3 and 4 are just vacant grassed area, and lot 6 is where the parking lot is currently. We've illustrated a conceptual building envelope on each of the properties to show that they could accommodate a single detached dwelling as well as a detached garage consistent with the local neighborhood. And the last one is lot number 5, which accommodates the parish hall. It's noted that actually lot 5 and lot 6 will have a right-of-way over the church driveway to accommodate parking in the rear. John mentioned a number of studies that were completed. I'll draw attention to the conclusions of the Heritage Impact Study, where that the proposed development is a good example of an adaptive reuse of a surplus church building and a continuing use of its related buildings and property. It was determined that there would be no negative impacts on the heritage attributes of the former church and presbytery, and impacts to changes in property landscape would be mitigated by following conservation principles and residential design guidelines. It is designated residential in the official plan. The OP identifies low density as being up to 30 dwelling units per net hectare. All of the proposed lots range in density from 11.4 to just under 30. The proposed built form will be single detached dwellings, which is the typical built form in low density neighborhoods. Within low density neighborhoods, libraries, museums, and small scale community center or other social cultural centers are permitted. So the conversion of the church to an archives facility is permitted within the existing designation. We are of the opinion the proposed development is compatible with the adjacent uses, which are largely single detached dwellings. It's not anticipated to create adverse effects, such as shadowing or noise. It meets the functional needs of site users. All of the lots as proposed can accommodate parking, amenity space, and appropriate access. It maintains the heritage character of the area. As John stressed, the church wants to maintain the heritage of the existing buildings. And it also helps achieve the intensification targets for residential infill. So we're of the opinion the request is consistent with the intent of the official plan. The existing zoning for the property is an A5 zone, and we're proposing 4 new site-specific A5 zones to accommodate the development. This is a summary of the areas of relief requested. I'll draw attention to some of the ones that might be of interest. The parking, we've completed a parking study as relief from the requirement for the archives facility was required. A lot of the areas of relief are just to recognize the existing conditions. It is noted for the new lots to be created, relief from lot area was required, as well as the front yard setback to make it appropriate with the parish hall, as well as abutting residential development. We are of the opinion the requested relief is appropriate for a number of reasons. It's a positive example of adaptive reuse, as was the conclusion of the heritage impact study, and it maintains and supports the identified heritage features on the site. It helps achieve intensification targets for residential infill by creating 3 new single-family dwelling lots, and it maintains the compatibility with development in the area. The built form for the vacant lots is compatible with existing residential development. The setbacks and the detached garage are consistent with what is in the local area. And the parking ratio, 9 were required, and we're proposing 6 for the archives use. It's my understanding there'll just be 1 or 2 staff working at the facility, and the requested relief was supported by the parking study. So to summarize, the requested zoning bylaw amendment is appropriate as it's consistent with the PPS, conforms to official plan policies, is compatible with existing residential land uses, which are largely single-family dwellings, and supports the heritage value of the on-site resources, which was supported by the HIS. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to just wrap up.
So thank you, Nancy and John. Just when the time comes, our request to planning committee is that they would recommend approval of the application to council. I just want to add and echo actually what John Gerritsen had noted about the interim control bylaw in terms of its impact. You are members of council, so I'll take this opportunity since I won't be able to attend on Tuesday night just to bring that to you as members of council that this project would be impacted, and I think it would be unfortunate if that happened, and so we would ask that council consider ways that it could be changed so that this project would be unaffected. So, thank you.
Thank you. Could I hear from staff, please? Mr. Sands?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The application was noticed as per the requirements of the Planning Act, which included circulation to 129 surrounding properties. Further to that, 2 pieces of public correspondence have been received to date, and they've been included in your package for your review. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Yes, I understand. I'm assuming that both the church and the rectory are designated heritage properties, which I really appreciate. They're beautiful buildings. There is a concern about unintended consequences from an interim control bylaw that I've heard in a couple contexts. I'm just wondering, the church itself would be institutional, I would think, and altering it to become an archive would not be restricted, I wouldn't think, since it's another institutional use.
Through you, Madam Chair, the conversion of the church to archives, the interim control bylaws, as recommended through the motion of council, would only apply to residential uses, so it wouldn't apply to affect this. And also, just to offer some clarification, the entirety of the property owned by the church is designated under the Heritage Act, so all of the other properties as severed would also remain designated.
Thank you. And the rectory is residential, and I understand that the proposal is for it to remain single residential, so that any kind of internal renovations that they cared to do would not be subject to the interim control bylaw. Is that accurate?
Through Madam Chair, the motion as put forward indicates that the internal conversions or alterations would not be able to create new bedrooms. or add any floor area, or create additional units internal to a structure.
Thank you. If you haven't had an opportunity yet, perhaps John and the planners can meet with our planning staff and talk about best ways to kind of get around this, because I think this is a really good proposal. And it would be an unintended consequence in my mind if we said no to this. But we're in a situation where we need an interim control bylaw for other reasons in other parts of the city, and in Portsmouth as well. So whatever you can do would be, I think, helpful. So.
Yes, Mr. Garrettson, go ahead. If you need to press the button, there you go, you're on.
Oh, that modern technology. Didn't used to be this way. You had to shout. Yes, we had to shout. Just so that there's no misunderstanding as to the reason why the redevelopment of the property is necessary. As I've mentioned before, we have a report that is 3 years old that is basically saying that we have to spend about $600,000 in order to bring this church into a good state of repair. There's no longer a congregation there, and the only way to fund those repairs is to sell the rectory, sell each one of the 3 individual lots, also sell the parish hall, which is, for most of you that are familiar with it, is more like a single-family home already, and then to utilize those funds in order that the necessary repairs can be done, and potentially also set up an endowment fund so that the archival work within the church on behalf of the Catholic community can continue there for many, many years to come. So there is somewhat, an interim control bylaw, the way I understand it, may delay the whole process by at least 2 years. And that would mean a minimum of 2 years before any kind of restoration work could take place. So there is absolutely no intent to change the exterior of the church whatsoever. Perhaps some internal renovations are necessary in order to put in the archival material, but it will not change the exterior appearance of the church, and I would dare say the rectory either, because you're quite correct, they are both designated buildings within the volume that deals with the Portsmouth area that was done by Jennifer McHenry, who worked with Bray Consultants on this issue some 40 years ago, 35 years ago, a few years ago.
Thank you very much.
If I could just add a clarification, because it kind of goes to the intent as well, and assurances maybe about what those empty lots or how they would be developed in the context for their development. So since they're, as planning staff pointed out, the properties are designated under the Heritage Act, even once they're severed, they would still be designated, and even if the designations on the vacant lots were removed, they would still be adjacent to a designated property, so they'd be subject to an HIS. They'd also be subject to site plan control. So the vacant lots, in terms of any concern about the size of buildings that would go on them, they'd be subject to zoning that would only allow a single detached dwelling. They'd have to be supportive of the existing, or the heritage character of the church and of the other designated properties. So this is a somewhat unique development, I guess, in terms of all those controls that are there in terms of controlling form and use. So, thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I have a question for staff. Unfortunately, I was away when this motion was passed at council. I happened to be away in Mexico. Well, it wasn't passed, but it was brought forward to council. So in terms of redevelopment on the property, the lots that are empty, would it be subject to this proposed intermediary bylaw?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the bylaw attached to the staff report being brought forward next week would restrict the creation of the new lots. It would also restrict the conversion of the existing buildings to residential. because there would be more than one building on a property without the lot creation occurring. So it would affect this proposal.
Okay, thank you. So we do need to consider that possibly going forward with this proposal. Also, Mr. Gerritsen, I was wondering about the archives facility, and I was wondering if in the future, if that could be something of a tourist attraction, if that might be a consideration for people that would be interested in that?
Well, certainly the building is already of great interest to individuals. A Jane's Walk was held there last May that's attracted upwards to 100 people. And so it's a very unique church. Although it wasn't built by inmates, certainly the stone that was used in order to build the church came out of the quarry that was quarried by inmates. And it is, I've never brought anybody to Kingston yet when I take them into the area that aren't highly impressed and highly interested in how a church like this got built, and basically carries the name of the good thief, which is highly unusual. It is not the intent to turn the property into a museum at this point of time. Now, an archives obviously will attract some people that are studying various matters into the place, but I would dare say that the number of people that will come into the building would be less than what would have been in its better days, the congregation that lived in the area, that attended services certainly every Saturday and Sunday, and many times during the week as well. So I can tell you parking has never been an issue there, a major issue as far as I know, and I go back 40 or 50 years there, because of course most of the parking took place on Sunday in the adjacent neighborhoods. But we'd rather stay away from the idea of a museum at this point of time. We're getting great feedback from the different Catholic organizations that all have material that I think are worthwhile for individuals to keep in an archival situation. And we've even had some interest from non-Catholic Christian organizations as well that may want to utilize it, because I think a lot of the churches and a lot of the Catholic organizations and other organizations are going through exactly the same thing as to what do you do with all of your archival material, which quite often now is just stored in boxes and basements and things like that. So, but a museum, I think that's kind of out of the question now. Will the building attract some general interest of the public? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's a very fascinating place.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Osanek?
Through you, Madam Chair, a question to staff about the interim control bylaw. When council was talking about it 10 days ago at council, I thought we heard that there'd be a grandfather clause, that those applications that are through the process or have kickstarted the process, like this application, could be grandfathered so that they wouldn't be affected by the interim control bylaw. I haven't read the material yet for next Tuesday's council meeting, so I don't know if that grandfather clause is mentioned, and if it's not, do we have the option next Tuesday night to add in a grandfather clause?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So as part of the preparation of the staff report that's attached to the council agenda for next Tuesday, there is a legal consideration section as requested by council that goes into a number of legal considerations for council's consideration related to enacting an interim control bylaw. As it relates specifically, the report does address the issue of grandfathering or exemptions, and it goes into some of the legal precedent and also giving council direction just to exercise caution in going forward in that way, because it can be interpreted to undermine the principle for the reason that the bylaw was enacted in the first place in the land use study. That being said, council always has the ability to provide direction to amend the bylaw to include exemptions, and there is some case law precedent that suggests specifically properties that have gone through an entire Planning Act or Heritage Act process, but yet have not yet been able to obtain a building permit, where the Ontario Municipal Board has given site-specific consideration to those properties for an exemption from an interim control bylaw in other municipalities.
Thank you. I'll add one question to that. If the area were exempt, then it would be under today's bylaws. And one of the items that's been happening in our areas is single-family homes being doubled in size to become duplexes full of bedrooms, or a couple of lots being purchased and put together to create a really large house. So under our current bylaws, could these sorts of things happen, even if it's zoned? We say it's single-family home.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. There is the potential for built form to take place on the single-family home parcels that maybe some people would consider to be undesirable, simply from the standpoint that we don't have the ability to regulate the number of bedrooms in a single-family home without being discriminatory.
Thank you. And the interim control bylaw currently would be for 1 year, and then with the possibility of an extension, but there is a plan to have a study done within that year.
Yeah, so one of the criteria for council to be able to use this section of the Planning Act is the commitment to undertake in an expeditious manner a land use study for the area in question. And the Planning Act does give the provision that that study needs to be completed within a period of 1 year from the time that the bylaw is enacted, subject to the potential extension for a second year based on another council approved motion giving that direction. So it can be up to 2 years, but the intention is for 1 year, if all possible, based on the way the Planning Act is written.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Just one very quick one. Is it possible in a period of interim control bylaw to affect any kind of site preparation or severance that's going to be required and require a number of months to happen anyway? So even though they may be governed by an interim control bylaw, can they do anything in preparation for?
Thank you, and through you. So in terms of any potential land division cannot take place during the time that an interim control bylaw is enacted, simply because you're trying to regulate use. So to create or to amend parcel fabric, that would have the intended consequence of allowing a use that's prohibited by the bylaw. You can't do that during the time the interim control bylaw is enacted. That said, certain things may be related to site clearance or grading, but potentially, again, when you look at that from a staff perspective, we would want to see that attached to a development plan and to know how that's going to proceed. So it's unlikely that staff would be supportive of something of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions from the committee, I'd like to open this to the public. And Mr. Dixon, if you'd like to start. And name and address, please, and 5-minute limit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Frank Dixon, 495 Alfred, Department 2, K7K, 4J4. So I want to thank the proponents for the presentation, the planners, and former Cabinet Minister, Mr. Gerritsen, for excellent presentation. I've been following the file, and I'm supportive of the proposal. I think it's very interesting and creative ideas going on here. I think it fits in with Council's view of proper infill redevelopment. So I think that's a very strong high card in its favor. I do have some concerns maybe on some of the minor aspects of this. I think the question on the interim control bylaw has been handled well through council and staff's material so far. So in general, I'd be in favor of some sort of an exemption being arranged for this project with respect to that bylaw. It's not an area I know that well, but I was following the file on it. So what I'm wondering, given that we have heritage designated properties here, whether this has gone to Heritage Kingston and maybe it should go there as well. So that'll be a consideration. With respect to what may be happening on the newly severed lots, as was described, there are 3 of them. I would advocate for high-quality new development on those lots which is compatible with the area. I know there's various rules around that. It is close to St. Lawrence College, so there could be strong demand for new housing created there. It's only a few blocks away. So that would be another high card in favor of the development, because you would be likely able to sell or rent that property and, to actually do well on your investment, which would then be able to pay for the costs of the new project. So I'm in favor of all of that. One point raised by a member on the committee, talked a little bit about the possible tourist attraction of this, and I'll just add that I think the heritage features of the property maybe could have a higher profile than we have so far. So perhaps, once the archives are established, perhaps you can have a day of the week which is designated for visitors who wish to go there, apart from those archivists who wish to access the material. And I'll just add one final point. I was impressed with the thoroughness of the studies which have been done on the many aspects which affect the proposal. So that's excellent work there, and $100,000 invested, outstanding. But I would like to have seen more detail from those studies included in the report. So perhaps that could be available for the record later on. I'm just very interested in the proposal. I think it's, it's a genius level of idea, in my view. So I would like it to go ahead, but I do have some concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am? You'll just push the little button at the bottom there, and it turns red, and you'll be on. There you go.
There we are.
Thanks.
Usually people can hear me anyways. My name is Caroline Yull, and I live right across from the back entrance to this property. And I love this property. I walk my dog through there every day, and I do pick up the poop. And it's always fascinated me ever since I moved there, which isn't that long ago. Just what a wonderful little space it is. So I'm with you. I think that this proposal of how to deal with this land is a good one in many ways. However, and it's a big however, I live right beside the schoolyard of the little school that's there. It's a private school. It's a school that attracts mostly children with some kind of learning disabilities or some kind of mental disease. And so they're very vulnerable children. Every day in the morning and at the end of school, there are more cars than you can possibly believe there would be on our street, dropping off and picking up children. And there are kids running out to cars, and not all of them are very careful about that. Partly because that's their mom waiting for them in the car, and partly because they do have some mental disabilities. So when I looked at your plan for the property, I was very impressed. I really like the plan. I like the lower density than what I was expecting to see tonight, frankly. But I really hope that the people who are going to do this event would consider very strongly moving the entrance to the property onto the side street rather than the street at the back of the property. Mainly because there are going to be a lot of vehicles going in and out of there. If you have, how many? Six? Okay, so let's say each of those has a family in it. So mom has a car and dad has a car and the older son has a car and the younger daughter is just about ready to get old enough for a car, and you know what it's like, right? So to have all that many more cars going onto our little street, which is full of older houses which have been broken down into little teeny tiny apartments for students at the college. So there, I mean, somebody parks in my laneway because I don't have a car, and she had nowhere to park her car. And I said, sure, you can park in my laneway because I don't care. But to put that much more traffic onto that street, I think is careless and very dangerous. And it's not that when I say careless, I'm not saying something bad about anybody. I think if you don't live there, you don't know this. But that is a street that is overburdened already and needs to be exempted from all the traffic from that piece of property going in the back. That's my proposal. My proposal to that is that you could arrange the houses in such a way that they could come in off the side road instead. And I think you would be making things much, much safer in our neighborhood. And I'm in favor of that. I don't like seeing kids get hit by cars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak to this application? No, seeing none, then I will ask our proponents to respond to some of the questions that have been raised, particularly onto Heritage Kingston and the parking.
And I'll answer one question, and I'll actually see Carl Bray sitting down there, and I might actually just get him to pop up here for a minute. He's the author of the HIS, and just give a brief overview of the process with this type of development with respect to heritage approvals, because it is a bit potentially complicated given all that's going on. So just with respect to a couple of questions, though, I'll let Carl get settled. So the idea of potentially moving the road around to the access road around to McDonald Street, certainly something we can look at. I think the main reason why it's there is because that's the entrance. The existing entrance is essentially being maintained from the church. And so there's 6 parking spaces proposed for the archives, and based on the anticipated level of use of the archives, like maybe 1 to 2 people on an average day would be actually at the archives. And then there's 2 houses that would also access that off that street. So on the whole, it seems like compared to the church and the level of activity that could happen there, we think the actual traffic impact would be reduced or lessened than as a church property. But it's something we'll certainly discuss with the team as well. In terms of one of the comments we had earlier as well about the potential size of houses that could be put on there, the zoning is limited to A singles. The site-specific zoning as proposed would be limited to singles. There's also maximum lot coverage allowed as well, and the setbacks recommended through the HIS would really tightly limit kind of the size of the building envelope on the site, meaning limiting the size of the building, the house that could go there as well. And again, through heritage impact study that would have to be done and site plan, there's a lot of opportunity on the site. Again, is a somewhat unique situation to really control exactly how those empty lots get developed. So I'll pass it over to Carl now just to speak about the heritage component.
Thank you. Through you. Just again, this is I think a very interesting project because you are actually retaining the key things that are important about the overall property. And I commend the church for thinking of a good way of approaching a redundant church building. And the archival use, I think, is appropriate. Certainly there are options in the future for other uses of the interior. And certainly at this stage, there's no intent to alter the interior, which has many fine features. So you've got a flexible plan, but the primary use for archival use, we've recommended that it be primarily contained in the rear of the existing church where it can be climate controlled in more appropriate collections management conditions. In terms of the rest of the property, the openness of the main part that you see from King Street and from the corner will be retained. So you've got the presbytery, you've got the presbytery and the church building, you've got the landscape between them. Those will remain open, and that feeling of openness and feeling of connectedness between those 2 primary buildings will be retained. Even the stables at the back, the former stables, which was the church hall, it's a much altered building. There are remnants of the original limestone stable. It will remain as a single family or a multiple unit dwelling. There really won't be any substantial changes to it. And then in terms of the infill, as Mark pointed out, we're trying to make sure that the building footprints are small, that you read the landscape between the buildings so that you're not getting a solid wall of buildings in there. And there's some key landscape components, as you well know. There's some mature trees. There's a decorative iron fence along the side. All of those elements that we believe are important. There's some religious statuary which may or may not remain on the site, but other than that, the openness, the major portions of the lawn and the major trees will remain. So in terms of doing the heritage impact statement, we went through the standard practice that the city requires. We evaluated it according to the Ontario Regulation 906, which is what one does. There's also an Ontario Heritage Trust easement, primarily on the church property. That will not be affected by the proposal. We checked out any potential impact on adjacent properties and found that there would be nothing significant. So our conclusions were that the proposal made sense. It certainly retained and conserved the key heritage elements of the property, and it was a sensible response to a redundant property, and it would integrate well within the neighborhood in terms of supplying more of the small detached residential properties that characterize that part of Portsmouth Village.
And could you just elaborate on whether this will go to the Heritage Kingston Committee?
I'm going to put that back to Mark. I'm not sure whether this is a requirement in this particular case.
And here I was hoping that you would answer that question. So it will go, then I may ask staff to jump in just on the exact timing of processes, but since the property is designated, and so where changes are being proposed to properties that are designated like this, it does have to go through a heritage approval as well, and I'm not clear whether this is something that is delegated or what components may be delegated, and what components go straight to council. So to help answer the question, maybe I'll ask staff to.
Ms. Vendetta?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Heritage Committee will provide comments on the application to staff in consideration of the Planning Act applications. When the actual development comes forward, it would be development in terms of anything occurring on the proposed lots or conversions to the structures themselves. That would absolutely be required to go to Heritage Committee.
Great, thank you. And any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will thank you very much for your presentation and close our first public meeting. And we do have a second public meeting, and it's an application for draft plan of subdivision, draft plan of condominium, 311 Conacher Drive. Okay, Mr. Keene, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, and staff. And it looks like maybe only my colleagues. Oh no, there are a few members of the public here as well. My name is Mike Keene, and I'm a land use planner with Foten Consultants. And I'm here tonight to tell you about the project at 311 Conacher Drive. So maybe I'll just provide a brief summary. This is a project that has actually been before the city before, and some members that were on council last time may remember this one. And so this application had a plan of subdivision, a plan of condominium, and a zoning bylaw amendment. And what has happened is the original owners allowed the subdivision and the condominium to lapse. So the Planning Act requires that plans of subdivision, plans of condominium fulfill their conditions within 3 years. The owners of the property were busy with other things in the GTA. I honestly warned them back in the spring that it was going to lapse. It lapsed. They have since sold the project to the name you see on the page, Nicholas Kirakopoulos. What I can tell you today is that I'm working very closely with Nick, who has not only purchased the property, but has also assumed the company, Conacher Kingston Holdings, and we are actively working on addressing comments that we've received from staff, as well as advancing the application finally completely for final approval. So just quickly on the neighborhood and other aspects of the development for those that might not be familiar with this project, it's in the Rideau Heights community, close to the 401, close to all the recent commercial development that's happened along Division and Dalton Avenue, and it would represent the development of a vacant parcel of land. That vacant parcel of land had a plan of subdivision on it back in the 70s, which formed Marker Crescent, which has never been built. A few more statistics for you. It's a 19-acre site. It has about 60 meters of frontage, kind of split between the two roads, plus a little bit extra on the west side. The park in the bottom right corner of the image is Marker Acres Park, and there's a few other parks that you might be familiar with in that area, Headway Park and Shannon Park. It's close to those parks. The land to the north between Highway 401 and the development parcel is land that is owned by Ministry of Transportation but is zoned as open space. So as I noted at the beginning, one error on my slide as well, there was draft approval granted for the subdivision and the condominium in the past, and the zoning amendment was passed and would remain in place. There's actually 257 units, not 258. Not a huge difference, but I just want to point out that error on my slide. This provides you with a pictorial. Now, this is the original graphical image that the architect did for the original plan. What I will note to you is that this is before draft approval, but it's the best image I had to show you what's going on in terms of the townhouse arrangement, the interior condominium roads, and the connecting green spaces. And the one thing that changed during the process that is not visible on this graphical image is that working with staff and working with the former owner, we actually provided an additional green link right through the center of all these townhouses. So the roads are all are slightly changed to make that pedestrian linkage. And then the pedestrian linkages, there are a few of them that go into the park to the east. This is the development that got all the press for being a gate, having a gate on it. So that this doesn't come back to haunt this project in the future, I can assure you that the new owner wants nothing to do with having any form of secure access. And that was partly why we made sure there were all these connections so that people would understand that there really was never the intent to have a gated community, but it really got a lot of press for that. So this is the actual draft plan that is before you, and it's black and white, but you can see that linkage where my arrow is joining everything, so that if you do live on the far side of this community, you can cut it right down the middle to both get to Conacher, which will be the main road, as well as to the park. This would be the condominium plan, and the condominium parcel is the essentially the roads, the parks, the stormwater management, it's all picked up on one block. So where this is slightly different than a traditional subdivision is that the people that live in this condominium, these townhouses, they will be responsible for the maintenance of the roads, the stormwater ponds, the green spaces. So that will all be part of their fee. The best way to think of it is to think of the townhouse development that is on John Counter Boulevard east of Montreal Street. Used to be Elliott Street, or maybe still is Elliott Street. But there are townhouses there, and if you've ever driven through there, they're on narrow roads. It allows for quite a dense townhouse development. This product is a very similar model to that one. So in terms of a quick summary for you, the intent of this application would be to reinstate the expired draft plan approval on both the plan of subdivision and the plan of condominium. And the intent with the current owner is as much as possible to carry forward that same plan and to get it done quickly. He would like to have a shovel in the ground in the spring, of course, if I could allow him processing and whatnot. It will be some time, pending your approvals, of course. The plan, because it is the same as it was before, it complies with the zoning that is in place on this property, and also is consistent with both the official plan and the provincial policy statement. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Could I hear from staff, please? Ms. Diedrichsen?
Through you, Madam Chair, notice of the meeting was provided in accordance with the Planning Act, and notices were mailed to 71 property owners in the area. I received one telephone call requesting further information, but no written correspondence.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Thank you. And I'm pleased to hear that the dreaded gated community isn't going to happen. I know that the councillor of the day for that district had great issues with that. So, and I appreciate the pedestrian accessibility that is being proposed to be added. And quite frankly, condominiums aren't such a bad idea because you pay more taxes, and the city doesn't have to keep up the roads in that. As I understand it, all of those internal roads would be the responsibility of the condominium organization to do plowing and maintenance on. So I appreciate that. Since this went through pretty much the whole approval process before, do we have a tentative site plan that probably will go forward as far as landscaping and those kinds of things?
Ms. Venditti?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This went through a full draft plan of subdivision process, so there are required conditions in the draft conditions that were previously approved that require landscaping plans, stormwater management, and all of those detailed designs. The draft plan conditions that would be proposed going forward would be essentially the same, with some updates based on some changes that may have occurred from the previous approval till now, but it would still be required to be part of the final design.
And there will be a park or a parkette as part of the design as well that can serve the community?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think as Ms. Venditti pointed out already, the draft conditions pick up what we would do under site plan on a smaller scale project. So some of the draft conditions that I would assume staff will recommend to you to carry forward include architectural guidelines to make sure that we don't have a mono townhouse type development. And in addition to that, the parks have to be designed, whether it's, parkettes, it's play features, just places to sit. So all of those pieces are already part of the draft conditions that have lapsed that would be, I'm imagining, carried forward and as well as updated where necessary.
And I appreciate that this whole area is looking at going through a very major revitalization process, and this is a good step forward in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. So just to clarify, did I hear that the city will not be paying for any of the services like snow plowing and watering of the lawns? Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct. And I mean, where it gets even better potentially is that, and I believe this is the way it works in the other subdivision that's of a similar scale, is that that condominium corporation actually contracts the city to do the plowing and garbage. But as opposed to it being part of the actual expectation, it's kind of, in a sense, like almost like double dipping.
Okay.
I mean, at the same time, they probably have RFPs and bids to see who will plow their snow for the least amount of money in garbage pickup and so on. But I can tell you that that's the way it works. Like, it's the incredible thing with condominium. The advantage here for the developer is they don't have to build a 20-meter wide right-of-way of road. So they do get a little bit more density in terms of the number of units they can get out of the same amount of land. But in terms of the layout, one of the primary differences in this development was that what we ensured was that all the units still had like 6-meter deep backyards. So besides the nice common space, each unit has a commonly sized backyard comparable to other developments as well.
That's wonderful news. And if I may ask, this is going to be a very strongly and firmly worded contract? Like, they won't come back in, say, 15 years and ask the city to take on this burden?
That's correct. So through you, Madam Chair, basically for a condominium to fail, you would have to have essentially 257 failed tax sales that you, as the city, then become an owner and therefore a part of the condominium. So, I mean, I'd like to believe that, is it impossible? No. Is it unlikely? I would say very highly. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Neal?
Quickly, if I remember rightly from the previous submission, those properties already built that front on Conacher Drive, those are freehold private units.
That's correct.
Some of them rental, but everything else behind that will be part of the condominium subdivision.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions from the committee, I'd like to open the floor to the members of the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes? Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have one point that I wanted to raise, and with respect to transit, given that you're going to be putting in substantial new high-density development, which I think is needed and appropriate for the site. I think that the plans are interesting, thorough, might be some tuning needed. But I just wanted to point out that along Conacher Drive, which is on the southern edge of the proposed development, you have two existing bus routes, numbers 2 and 7, which already do service that. But I don't know where the stops are with respect to where the development is set to be built. And in addition, you also have route number 1, which is a couple of blocks to the south of Conacher. So 1 and 2 are major routes, to and from downtown, very heavily used. And 7 is a route that goes across John Connor Boulevard towards, bus and train stations and Cataraqui Town Center. So you do have pretty good access to different parts of the city. And also the express bus route along Division Street would be available for those who want to transfer off number 2. There's going to be a new express route on Montreal Street coming in a couple of years as well, and that's nearby to the east. So it does fit well with the city's improved and expanded transit and our greater ridership that we're seeing. So that's another I would say a high card in its favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? I'm not sure if you can address the transit question as to where the stops are currently.
Well, I'm not sure if I was fully understanding Mr. Dixon's question, but for 100% clarity, because these are condo roads, the bus wouldn't actually get rerouted into the development. So the bus routes would remain unchanged, but of course, I think it would be hoped by both us and the city that that would mean we would have more ridership potential on these buses. So the proposal would not be to route the bus through the development. They would have to walk to Conacher or walk to Division, as you noted, to pick up those buses.
Thank you. And any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. And with that, I will close our second public meeting. And we have another public meeting, application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1316 Centennial Drive. And Mike Keane will be doing that presentation.
Well, good evening again. This time I am here on behalf of the City of Kingston, representing a development that I'm very excited to be a part of. I have lived in the area of the City of Kingston for 15 years, and I can say this is the first time I've had the opportunity to work on a major manufacturing proposal. And it has been great to work with the city and their business park to bring this application forward tonight. So the project is for a large dairy operation, and it would be located within the city's business park. And it has, as you can see from this larger aerial photo, good access to Gardner's Road and great access to Highway 401, and it's right in the heart of the city's business and industrial park. Just moving in image-wise a little bit closer now, and you can see the red box highlights the site that's actually in question, which is a 38-acre site. It has 360 meters of frontage along Venture Drive and 430 meters of frontage on Centennial. And what you can see from this image is how it's really in the heart of the city's business park. Residential uses are located 500 meters away to the east, and similarly 500 meters away to the south. West of the site is Frulac, that's getting closer to being ready. And of course, you've got more business park to the west, some of the city's vacant business park lands to the north, and Highway 401 above that. So the company that is hoping to move on to this property is FEA International Inc. And I've just highlighted some of the facts about the company. They are one of the largest dairy companies in China. They've, as you can see, been at it for quite a long time. And I think, what's key to pick up on this slide is the few little tidbits of information about the company. They're award-winning, they're working on R&D, and they also have other operations that are outside of China as well. And it's also critical with a company like this, they want to get operational quickly. They hope to break ground this spring so that they can be operational in 2019. This is a conceptual site plan for the development. So what you can see on this slide is the central location of the proposed building, which is 312,000 square feet. So most certainly a very large building. And this site plan also shows the entrance proposed along Venture Drive, which would be your front entrance, your main entrance, and there would also be a secondary entrance for loading proposed off of the new proposed street number A. And parking is located along Centennial Drive. And what's deceptive from this image is the size of this site. So even though there's parking proposed along Centennial Drive, there is actually quite a large buffer between the road and the proposed parking, as well as some elevation change. This was a conceptual image provided to me to help me to understand the operations and how the facility works. So what you can see when you flash between the slides, you can see the grayed out image on the south. You can see the office on the south, which will help orient you on this image. But the southmost part of the T is the office lab, probably the R&D area. And then on this left side is really a lot to do with processing. So the materials come in from the east, pre-treatment, and they go through in terms of evaporation and drying and packing. And then there's quite a large storage area, as well as there's a visitor area where they hope to have people come and see the operations. These images are typical of planning. They're not extremely helpful, other than they really help to tell the story in terms of the overall scale of the plant that's proposed. And I have a few images that I will show you of another one of their plants, just to give you a better feeling for what this actually looks like. But what they do show you is that the drying tower part of this facility is quite tall. It's 43 meters in height. And then also there are other parts of the building that would be about 27 meters in height. So that's just to give you a sense of the size of the building. So to show you more what that actually looks like, they were kind enough to provide us some pictures of some of their other facilities. And so you can see the taller drying portion. You can see the silos containing the milk, and a little bit of the layout here. You can see that this is also a winter photo, so quite helpful in terms of showing the facility. And you can see the pristine condition of a food manufacturing facility with the stainless steel and the quite clean floors and whatnot that go along with production of this nature. So moving more to the official plan, what this image shows you is that the site is within the general industrial designation lands within the city's business park, and then the slightly darker blue is the business park lands. So we're in the right category for manufacturing of this scale. The property itself is designated general industrial, and types of uses in general industrial are manufacturing, construction, storage, warehousing, automotive industry. Those are the types of things that the Kingston official plan would like to see in the general industrial area. Now, in terms of developing land within the industrial area, there's quite a few requirements. I'm just picking up on a few of those. But in terms of some of the things that we're trying to accommodate, I think this site does well. We're looking for large parcels of land that can accommodate larger uses, being that this is a city-owned parcel of land. It's city business park land. It's actually being able to utilize what was formerly 4 parcels all combined in one. So certainly quite exciting for that to be able to happen. It needs to have convenient and safe access to various forms of transportation. And in this case, we have good vehicle access both through arterial roads and Highway 401. And what you would have noticed from the conceptual plan I showed you was the central location of the building, and that's going to help deal with the needs of dealing with screening and buffering, as well as compatibility with the surrounding uses. I noted that the sensitive uses are really a little bit further away, but nonetheless, a central location as proposed will also help with immediate neighbors, further development of the site, and other uses within the business park. Much of the detail of how the site and site plan and stormwater, those things would all be worked out through the site plan control that's required for industrial development. In terms of zoning, the city had already gone through a zoning amendment for its business park lands, and in this site in particular, it already had a zoning amendment in anticipation of the types of uses that could come to the site, and some of those are listed here. The only use that's missing in terms of what's needed by this company is research and development. So our proposal is to add research and development to the zoning. In terms of the zoning, similarly, this business park has fairly new zoning on the site, and so there were only a few things that need to be adjusted. These tables show you the requirement and proposed, as opposed to proposed through a bylaw amendment. Proposed is really just showing you the numbers that apply to the concept plan. So some of the key aspects of this zoning amendment include height, twofold height. One, to address increasing the height largely for the majority of the building to 28 meters from 20, as well as to increase the height for a portion of the site to allow for the dryer to be up to 44 meters high. Now, as you likely know, parking in the city is, in industrial uses in particular, the spaces are associated to area. Well, this is a very large proposal, but a lot of that site is for storage. And so a parking study was done to justify the appropriate amount of parking for this site. And so that's the proposal is from a reduction from 656 to 188 spaces. And also the other amendments to this bylaw are really to do with the fact that it will have streets on all four sides. And so to help accommodate and provide some flexibility for the site, we're proposing some amendments to deal with being able to park and being able to load in all of the yards. But that doesn't prevent those setbacks from, in terms of landscape buffers, from being there. So it's not a case where you'll have parking right up against streets. You'll still have, we're not amending those required parking setbacks. So you'll always have a parking setback of just under 8 meters from any street. So just to summarize again the amendments that are before the committee tonight. First, to add the use of research and development. And second is to increase the height in two different ways, generally to 28 meters, and for 40% of the gross floor area, we're asking that that be allowed to be 44 meters in height. Reduce the parking to a specific ratio so that if there's ever expansions of the plant in the future, they would have to meet this new parking ratio of 0.65 spaces per 100 square meters. A very random number that you have to read the parking study to really understand why that number makes sense. And then the permission of parking in all yards and the loading in all yards. So in summary, it's my opinion that the reliefs requested are appropriate to accommodate a facility of this nature. Certainly when the business park policies were going through, it really was anticipating smaller uses. So it was pretty exciting to have something that will be this large proposed in the city. It's most certainly my opinion that the reliefs that are required will not impact any of the adjacent properties, whether it be the other industrial properties or the more sensitive uses as you get further away from the site. Site plan is going to deal with a lot of the technicalities in terms of how the site's going to be laid out and how loading and parking, how everything will function, but it will still be very close to the conceptual plan that was shown to you. It's my opinion the proposal's opinion is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It's consistent with the broad direction of the official plan. It certainly represents good land use planning, and it's going to do wonderful things for our city. It's going to do wonderful things for our dairy markets in Eastern Ontario and Quebec. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And could I hear from staff, please? Mr. Sands?
Through you, Madam Chair, the application was noticed as per the requirements of the Planning Act, and that included circulation to 11 surrounding properties within the 120-meter buffer. And to date, we've received 0 public correspondence in the form of written correspondence or telephone inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
It was refreshing to see so many things that meet exactly. The one sole thing that's giving me a little bit of pause is going from 650 some spaces to 188. And I know that in the discussion with the proponents, they have a very ambitious, much higher number than 188 as their number of employees. So has there been any discussion about how that might work out? I know that the number 7 and number 14 buses somewhat unperiodically serve that area, and with increased ridership, that may increase. But how can we address those issues?
Okay. Through you, Madam Chair, Peter Hugenbos with the City of Kingston. Thank you for the question, Councillor Neal. I think first you might be talking about the number of employees that are likely to be employed at the facility. And yes, it's estimated at 200, but there would be no situation where all 200 would be working at the same time. So again, it's a 24-hour operation. It would have up to 3 different shifts in one day, sometimes 2, and then it could be a 4th shift, depending on the production lines they have. So it would, the information from the company is approximately 100 employees could be at the facility at any one time, potentially a slight increase to that. So that is why the number is parking spaces is under the total number of employees. If there's an expansion to the plant and an increased size in the plant, that may cause a need for more parking. And definitely the city, as the proponent of selling property in this area, definitely want to increase transit ridership as well as routes through here. I can't tell you what that will look like at this point, but there are network improvements in the roads scheduled and approved by council that would provide for future opportunities for different routing.
Thank you. That's somewhat reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'll open it to the public. Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for presentation. It's a very interesting development. People have been following this. Great media coverage, great prospects for the city, expanding industrial development and expanding employment and all of these great things. So congratulations on this. Thanks for the work so far. So I do have a couple of issues I do want to raise. Councillor Neal was talking about the transit, and I was looking at my transit map, and routes 7 and 14 are the closest to it, but they are some distance away under the current arrangement of routes. And I know that we're going into a transit review period right now. So going along with our goals of increased ridership and being a more sustainable city, I would look to potentially modify the routes and maybe add some new routes through there. Just looking at the map on page 41 of the overhead view, I see also that there looks like a sort of a curved portion of what be a new segment of Centennial Drive coming through there, if I understand the map correctly. So the Route 14 is some distance to the south, Route 7 some distance to the west and the north. So trying to get those to connect through there. And just going along with that, the presenters were talking about the different shifts of operations at the plant. And I know there's issues with people who are working at StarTech way up in the northeast portion of the city with no transit available at the times when they're starting and ending their shifts, requiring either car usage or possible taxis or carpooling. So I know that some people on council are concerned about this. I know staff is as well. So just sort of fitting that in. Just changing themes, going on to the fact that we're going to be using a lot of additional hydro and water and sewer resources for this. I'm sure that's probably been looked at by the proponents and by city staff. So I just want to put it on the record that I want to make sure that we understand what we're dealing with here. It's a food processing facility, and it's going to be using a lot of power and water and possible sewer there. So I would encourage more detail in the reports going forward on that, so that the members of council, members of the public, and the media can be, I guess, reassured on that. I think it's important. It's good that the staff member is an engineer. He's probably very expert at that. So that's good. And then just one very minor point on the slide up ahead, just above us here. So we're looking at all the different requirements, and I don't actually have a problem with any of that. It seems reasonable given the use that you have, but just want to point on the loading access, you're actually mixing imperial with metric measures there. You got 20 feet, and then you have 9 meters. Whereas on all of your other comparisons, you're staying with the same units. So there'll be probably 6 meters there or so. So just for in terms of comparison with your eye. So thank you.
Thank you. And any other members of the public who wish to speak? No, I'm not sure if you could answer transit, but.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Again, I definitely not a transit expert, but as the lead on developing the business parks with the city, we do work with transit, and the connection of Centennial Drive from this business park and this site to Gardner's Road will definitely add opportunities for route additions or extensions or alterations. And of course, with that opportunity comes the challenges of doing that on bus schedules and routes. The operation will not be underway for at least 2 years from now, so there does provide an opportunity to find that optimal arrangement. And definitely, I'm personally aware of the issues with the StarTech and the stop times, and that should be incorporated into that transit review with when the shifts start and stop. And duly noted, of course, about the servicing requirements. Yes, a big user, and that has been a main strategy with Kingston being a location that's suitable for this company because of the city's investment in infrastructure and the partners we have to provide the power and the water and the sewer. So that's been a key component, and that will continue through the detailed design, but definitely was considered and looked at in order to secure this company coming here to Kingston. Thank you.
Just a quick point about the Imperial, and this is a 1976 zoning bylaw. So the interesting thing is that because city staff have already updated the zone, the M112, the zone itself is in metric, but a lot of the provisions of the bylaw are in Imperial. So I just checked, and loading access is still in feet, but for consistency, I'll convert it to metric next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none? Oh, no, good. Seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation. And that will close our final public meeting. And I will now open the business portion of the meeting and call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? Oh, with the addendum. Yes, we had some correspondence. Thank you. And confirmation of the minutes of January 5th. Councillor Osanek moves and Councillor McLaren seconds. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And we do have one disclosure of pecuniary interest that has been presented. We have no delegations briefings. And our first business item is 1100 Princess Street. It's a zoning bylaw amendment for that's the drive-through. And there is a recommendation from staff. So could we put the recommendation on the floor? Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Questions? Councillor Neal?
Yes, thank you. I still have some concern about what the impact of parking might be. Now, I see by a chart the required parking spaces. I didn't see, and perhaps I missed it in the report, the number of accessible parking spaces that are being proposed. And I'm assuming because it wasn't in the report that they're probably meeting the requirements. But and I'm sorry, I should have asked that question before. If you can just confirm that, that would be great.
Ms. is ready, yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, the required number of barrier-free parking spaces are being met through the proposal, so they are not asking for relief for barrier-free parking spaces. However, they are requesting for relief for barrier-free parking stall length from 6 meters to 5.8 meters to recognize the existing 12 barrier-free parking spaces on the property. Thanks.
And I know that a school board trustee who represents the LCVI area was here the night of the public meeting and expressed some concern about pedestrian and vehicular access to the site. And I know and I appreciate that a pedestrian traffic or vehicular study was requested and it's here. Why wouldn't we have asked for a more thorough parking and traffic analysis on this site, since it is a high traffic pedestrian area?
Through you, Madam Chair, staff consulted with the traffic division on the requirement for a traffic study, and the traffic division indicated that since existing accesses are being used for the proposal, no new access is being proposed to be created on Princess Street or on Sir John A. Macdonald. And because the site is adjacent to a signalized intersection, and because there was anticipated to be minimal impact on city-owned streets, a traffic study was not required for this proposal.
Is it possible to request, because at a lot of the Tim Hortons I see people snaking through the drive-through with cars idling for minutes at a time, which we actually have a bylaw against. Is it possible to have the developer, can we ask them in site plan to put up no idling signs? Is that a possibility through the requirement of?
Ms. Vendetti?
We can work with the developer through site plan to see what might be possible. In terms of no idling, I mean, a vehicle is usually running while it's in a drive-through lane. Typically, depending on the nature of the restaurant, if there are issues with an order not being ready or something, they have a pull ahead and wait area where potentially we could ask for a no idling sign if that's something that happens. But we can see what is possible through site plan control.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. This is a bit of a stab in the dark because I've heard a rumor that Tim Hortons is coming there, and they have a non-compete clause with others in the same area. So Coffee Eco may not have their lease renewed. I'm wondering if we have any tools to protect local businesses from foreign Brazilian-owned supernatural businesses at site plan or anything like that.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's really a market issue in terms of how the operator of the property or owner of the property runs their property. We're not able to regulate those types of details through the planning process.
So no land use tools, nothing? Okay.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? That's 3, one opposed? One opposed. And that's carried, thank you. And our second item of business is 700 Gardner's Road, official plan zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision. And there is a staff recommendation. Councillor Turner moves, Councillor Osanek seconds. Questions? Councillor Osanek? Okay, Councillor McLaren first.
May I ask if we had a chance to do a fiscal life cycle cost benefit analysis on this?
Through you, Madam Chair, that was not part of this application. We don't have that study.
Councillor Osanek?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, questions to staff. And it's about the letter that we received from a resident last night. And so the one thing is about having sidewalks on both sides of the streets. So how come it's only being proposed on one side of the streets?
Through you, Madam Chair, sidewalks are proposed on both sides of the street in areas of the subdivision and the main roads through the subdivision. The city standards do not require sidewalks on both sides of the street, and local streets, according to our OP policy, are only required to have sidewalks on one side of the street. So the proposed sidewalks in this subdivision are in accordance with the official plan, and I would note that staff have had a number of conversations with the developer and requested additional areas where the developer has agreed to provide sidewalks on both sides of the road beyond our existing policy.
Oh, that's excellent to hear. My second question is about the concern for the width of the streets being, like, some are 18 meters and others are 20 meters. So what's the split? Like, how many streets are that more narrow 18 meters? Is it like 50% of the streets, or is it just 30% of the streets being more narrow? I'm having a lot of issues even in my end of people parking their cars on the street and jumping on the transit bus during the day. And in my suburbs, far in the West End, people are saying that the streets are not wide enough to accommodate parked cars and, traffic flowing. So I don't want this new subdivision, which is so large, to have the same issues in a little suburb in the West End.
Through you, Madam Chair, if you turn to page 164 of your agenda package, it's the draft plan of subdivision. On the draft plan of subdivision, there's 2 streets, plus the extension of Swanfield that are proposed as 18-meter right-of-ways. We've gone through a lot of consideration with the engineering department, as well as from a planning perspective, to look at where we would be able to support the 18-meter right-of-way. The 18-meter right-of-way is probably maybe 20 to 30% of the road within the subdivision. A lot of it is where it's single-loaded road, where we don't have development on both sides. The Swanfield extension is 18 meters because it's an extension of an existing 18-meter right-of-way in the previous subdivision. So there's been a lot of careful consideration in terms of where we would be able to support it, looking at potential for on-street parking, snow storage, utility location, and all of those details. And that's why it's limited to the amount of road area that it is.
Okay, thanks so much. That takes care of that one. And so then the very last concern is just about the garages and if they can actually support, like our recycling bins, because as most municipalities have, you got the blue bin, the gray bin, the green bin, and then you also have cars and you have bikes. And I do agree with them that it puts a lot of pressure then on our taxed property standard staff, where we don't have a lot of, and if people are complaining that the blue boxes are on the front yards and homes are starting to look really sloppy, it just puts added pressure on our little property standards department that already is has way too many complaints for the staff that we have. So I do agree with them, and this is basically the major concern from what I've read that I agree with. And I just wondered, like, if there is a car, so these garages would be like single car garages, and is there enough room then to accommodate things along the side if you have your car in the garage?
Through you, Madam Chair, the lots that are proposed within the subdivision are consistent with lot sizes that have been approved throughout the municipality. With respect to the exact house designs that are going to be proposed for these lots, we don't have that level of detail at this point. However, garages would be possible on all of these lots. With respect to the width of the garages, they would be limited to, I believe it's 40% of the lot, which is what the zoning would require. There's also the potential for storage of things like blue bins and gray boxes in rear yards, as well as in rear yard accessory buildings. So there are opportunities beyond just the garage for the storage of those materials, but the details of the house layouts would be worked out through the building permit process and the lots themselves through the final subdivision approval. What I can confirm is that, as I said, the lots as proposed are consistent with lots throughout the city that have been approved with similar zoning standards. The lot frontages range in size. There's some that are 9 meters, there's 11-meter lots, there's 13-meter lots, so there's a variety of lot sizes, so there would be a variety of housing forms in this area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries unanimously. That was our last item of business. There are no motions, notices of motion, other business, and we received items of correspondence. Next meeting, February 2nd. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Turner. All those in favor?